here to support our Prime Minister. We live in New York, so when they come to visit, we come out to support.
Let's give our presidents and prime ministers another round of applause. Good evening. People of the Caribbean, good evening. Thank you. My name is Ivelaw Lloyd Griffith. I've got the privilege of being Provost and Senior Vice President for Academic Affairs at York College, City University of New York. You know, just across the river in New Jersey, there lived for almost 4 decades one of the most brilliant scientists of the 20th century called Albert Einstein. And Einstein, for almost 4 decades he taught at Princeton, had a simple sentence on his wall. I'll tell you what that sentence was. Not everything that can be counted counts, and not everything that counts can be counted. Not everything that can be counted counts, and not everything that counts can be counted. Now, what Einstein also recognized was that there are things that can be counted that also do count, that matter. The Caribbean diaspora can be counted. The Caribbean diaspora counts. Give yourselves a round of applause. And therefore, one might view this forum as a conversation involving people who can be counted and people who count, who matter in regard to what we do for our folk back home, who matter in relation to the family stability we provide, who matter in relation to the education and sustenance we give to our children. The diaspora can be counted and the diaspora counts. And this evening's conversation will begin in appropriate ways with an invocation reflecting the religious diversity of the Caribbean. We will begin first with the Reverend Stafford Byers from the Brooklyn Temple of the Seventh-day Adventists. He will immediately be followed by Pundit Rakesh Maharaj from the Sanata Dhamma Mahasabha, and we will then have Imam Haji Shakir from the Jasma Masjid. Please join me in welcoming Reverend Stafford Byers.
Let us stand forward. Let us pray. Our Father and our God, it is with hearts filled with gratitude that we have assembled here this evening. We pray your divine blessing upon this occasion. We thank you for our people. We ask you to bless us, both in the diaspora and those still at home. We thank you for those dedicated men and women who have dedicated their lives to the development of peace and tranquility of our people. Continue to bless them as they endeavor to do your will. And we look forward to the day when we'll all be able to join hands, when justice will flow down like water and peace like a mighty stream. This is our prayer in Jesus' name. Amen.
Sitaram, good afternoon. Let us all join our hands together. Dear Lord, just as all the rivers coming from different directions ultimately find their home in unity, so too may we all, though coming from different countries, ultimately find our home in unity. Harihi Om Gananam Dva Ganapatikam Havamahe Kavim Kavinam Umashravastamam Jeshradam Brahmanam Brahmanaspata Anashanvan Notime Sedasadhanam Bhadram Karne Vishwanayam Deva Bhadram Pashyema Kshabirjatraha Sthirairangashistavagam Sastano Vishayamahi Devahidam Yadayo Sahana Bhavato Sahana Bhunakto Sahaviryam Karavavahe Tejasvanavadetamastu Ma Vidvishavahe. May all the countries prosper. May there be peace on earth and may there be peace inside of us. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. I begin in the name of Allah, most merciful, most compassionate. All praises are for Almighty Allah, Lord of all the worlds, Master of the Day of Judgment. Thee do we worship, and Thee do we ask for guidance. Guide us onto the right path. We pray to Thee, Allah Ta'ala, to bless this diaspora forum that will bring about peace and harmony between Caricom and this particular event. We hope and pray that Allah Ta'ala in Thy infinite mercy and wisdom grant unto the leaders of various countries, especially Honorable Bharrat Jagdeo of Guyana, Mr. Manning, Prime Minister Manning of Trinidad and Tobago, Prime Minister Stevenson King of St. Lucia, and all other leaders of various countries. We sincerely hope and pray that Allah, You shall bring them together with peace and harmony, and let them work assiduously to ensure justice and equality for all. We hope and pray that Allah will bless Bharrat Jagdeo, President of Guyana, and to give him long life, health and prosperity to continue the good work together with Prime Minister Manning and others, that they have selectively done a wonderful job in bringing about people from all races and religions. And Thou hast said, Allah Ta'ala, in the Quran, that the Arab has no superiority over the non-Arab. The white has no superiority over the black, because we're all, according to You, Allah Ta'ala, the children of God. And therefore, let us hope and pray that this assembly tonight will bear fruit and shall be a living memory to show the world that how people of all races and religions in different countries, and follow the footsteps of our President Bharrat Jagdeo, that unify people of all races and bring them together in peace and harmony. May them live long and have a prosperous life. And let us all, as people from the Republic of Guyana and Caricom, let us all unite together solidly today, so that our tomorrow shall be proud of its yesterday. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Byers, Pundit Maharaj, and Imam Zakir. It is now my pleasure to introduce the host, one of the champions for change in higher education, not only in the City University of New York system, but within the nation at large, President of York College, Marcia V. Keyes.
Thank you, Provost Griffith. Good evening, everyone. Great, you're a good audience, you respond. As you've heard, I'm Marcia Keyes, and I'm president of this wonderful institution here, York College. And on behalf of our over 6,000 students, our 180 faculty, our many staff, I'm honored to welcome you this evening to this historic event. Never in our history at York College have we hosted a cadre of special guests of the magnitude we have tonight. Although in the past we have welcomed individually the Haitian President Provost, and we have also welcomed Nobel Prize winner Mohamed Yunus. But tonight we host a cohort of heads of states from the Caricom community, as well as distinguished members of the Consular Corps, and of course you, our distinguished audience from the Caribbean diaspora. Welcome to York College, welcome to Jamaica, welcome to Southeast Queens. We're delighted to be a partner with you on this 3-day event. And I want to also acknowledge my President colleague, President Edison Jackson of Medgar Evers, Carib News, Dr. Faye and Dr. Carl Rodney, HSBC and others. I don't think the Rodneys are in the audience tonight, but they are an anchor of this kind of work. I must also acknowledge our friends in government, and you will hear from our Borough President shortly, Helen Marshall, Chair Randall, who is not here tonight, but was with you by television last evening and yesterday, Congressman Gregory Meeks, who will speak to you in a minute, and also our Congressman Yvette Clarke, as well as Councilman Leroy Comrie, who is in the audience. As President of York, I have traveled a unique journey for many years. I left home, Jamaica, to go to the University of Manitoba in the Canadian prairies with the sole intent of getting my baccalaureate degree and returning home to be an English teacher. Never did I imagine that my journey would lead me to the position I hold today as president of a college in New York City, part of the City University of New York. So my journey from Kingston, Jamaica, to Jamaica, Queens, that is a part of my story. And indeed, there are many chapters to the story, but you're not here to listen to me tonight. But I want to evoke the privilege of being the president, to single out my name, and to welcome in absentia Bruce Golding, the Prime Minister of Jamaica, but to welcome in his stead Mr. Carl Samuda, the Minister of Investment and Trade, who indeed was a fellow student of mine many years ago. We attended Arden High School together. We produced some stalwarts, did we not? For 40 years, York College has been working at producing higher education right here in Queens, and we afford an affordable and academically sound education to residents born here, right here in New York, or to residents who are immigrants. And these individuals get a solid education in the liberal arts, in pre-law, in finance, in journalism, in social work, in allied health professions like physician's assistant, occupational therapy, and the like. At York, we are unique in that we have a partnership with the Food and Drug Administration Regional Lab on our campus, and we house as well the CUNY Aviation Institute with a flagship program in the degree in aviation management. To date, we have graduated some 20,000 students who have gone on to distinguished careers, some in civic life, like Wayne Hall, the mayor of Hempstead, originally from Jamaica, like Andrew Campbell, a molecular biologist, practicing his art at Brown University, originally from Guyana, and Dr. Deborah Prasad, Director of Children's Research on AIDS at Johns Hopkins, also originally from Guyana. And these individuals have made us proud. In my time at York, in the 3.5 years I've been here, I have presided over 4 commencements. And in 2005, Victor Whitney from Guyana was our valedictorian. Van Dien Brown from Jamaica was our valedictorian in 2006. In 2007 and in 2008, Sheridan Bisram and Arlene Best from Trinidad and Tobago. So you see that it is completely appropriate, ladies and gentlemen, that we are hosting this conversation tonight. because indeed we believe at your college that we have already started the partnering that needs to happen as we create the global intellectual power that will fuel your efforts. And so I greet you in behalf of our students and our alums, and I greet you to say that York College will continue to do our part to provide the rich intellectual soil in which this and other conversations of this sort will flourish. Greetings to you all.
From Jamaica to Jamaica, another round of applause for President Keys. I'm delighted now to introduce someone who is the representative, admirably so, not only of Jamaica, Queens, but the entire Queens. Please welcome the Borough President, Helen Marshall.
Good evening, everyone. 2 years ago, when Congress passed a special resolution that we declare the month of June as Caribbean Heritage Month, we had a show here that was absolutely spectacular. Tonight, we have the soul, we have the unity, and we have the strength of the entire Caribbean today. Powerful, powerful. Caricom was one of the places that we visited. We went to Guyana, the home of our mother and father, and both of them died when I was very young. We went to their home. We went to their country. President Jagdeo, Bharrat Jagdeo, was so gracious to us. I first met him here in Queens. He came and everybody said, Helen, you have to come. And I heard a leader. I heard someone talking about tourism, ecology, education, transportation, the environment, all the things that any good leader of any nation or jurisdiction would feel were important. Tonight, I am looking forward to everything that they have to say. My husband is here with me. He, of course, is from Beijing descent. So we got it all. And, you know, there is so much to do. And going to Guyana and going to Caricom and being welcomed by Edwin Carrington, he was absolutely spectacular. And we told him that our mother went to St. Rose's, and he called one of his secretaries over, and I just saw it happen, but it left my mind. The next thing I know, this wonderful lady comes and sits at the table, and she is the president of St. Rose's Alumni Society, And we have joined that organization, my sister and I. I met them right here in New York, and we're going to support St. Rose's. Well, I have been to a number of the Caribbean countries, but not to all of them. I have another year and a half to be your borough president. And guess what? My husband and I are going to be every single one of these wonderful countries. I feel so proud to be a Caribbean heritage. It's wonderful. I'm not going to talk too long because I know that we want to hear from our very distinguished guests, this elegant group of people. And let me see, we have one lady in the whole group. Okay. We don't do much better right here in the States. I'm only the second woman, and I'm the first African American. Okay, so I will leave you by saying, and certainly welcome to each of our distinguished guests. We look forward to everything that you have to share with us. We are hungry for the information that you will give us. God bless you, and welcome to Queens, the city of Belfast. Queens, the most multi-ethnic county in the world. And we celebrate every single nationality in this borough. Last night we just did the Philippines, but next week we'll be doing Argentina. We do all the countries of the world. And certainly having you here today is wonderful, really wonderful. And I thank you for coming, taking the time out of your schedules to come and be here with us. And I'm delighted about Caricom. I'm fascinated by it. When we were there, the secretary, Caricom secretary gave me a book about Caricom, and I've read it. I'm so proud of you. I'm very, very proud of you. And we're here to work with you any way in which we can help. That's why we're here. Thank you very much for coming and sharing your precious time with us.
She deserves a better round of applause than that. Come on. We are quickly getting to the part to hear the heads. But let me introduce to you the indefatigable congressman of the 6th Congressional District that includes not only Queens, but Far Rockaway and Howard Beach, Congressman Gregory Meeks.
Good evening. I can't tell you how proud I am today as the cameras of history is rolling on these great heads of states that we have right here in your college. It is indeed an honor and a privilege to have them here. But most importantly, they're not just here to say that they're here. They're here because they're on a mission. They're here to make a difference in the lives of our brothers and sisters, the neighbors of the United States of America, right down south of our shores and our borderline. And oftentimes, those of us in the United States have the opportunities to go down there to visit on vacation. But we don't think about the other opportunities that should exist in this global economy that we live in. And these great leaders have designed and decided by coming together, showing their strength. Last year, they were in Washington, talking to members of Congress and members of the administration, and we know that we've got to do better. We've got to do better in Washington, D.C. We invested money all over the place on our foreign ops, and we've got to do better by the Caribbean nations and Caricom to make sure that we're helping them with their energy needs, to make sure that we help them with trade, to make sure that we help them fight drugs. We have an obligation to do that. And I know with my colleague, Yvette Clarke, who is here, understand that they're not in New York by accident. This is a great city. But you know, as they used to say, why did Willie Sutton rob banks? Because that's where the money is. So why are they in New York today? Because that's where the money is. And guess what? We need to be talking to Wall Street and talking to all of those people who have money. There are great opportunities and investments in these Caribbean islands, and we need to make sure that money is going there so that they can continue to do the job that they're doing. So I say to you that as one of the senior members on the Western Hemisphere Subcommittee, that I pledge to continue to work with one of the great leaders of our country, the chair of the Ways and Means Committee, the Honorable Charles B. Rangel, to make sure that we stand strong and continue to fight to do the kinds of things that are necessary to give you the honor and, more important than the honor, the resources that you need so that you can continue to lead your nation. Because when we do that, we're also strengthening ourselves. When we do that, when we're sure that you're secure, we're making ourselves secure. When we know that you can employ your people, we know that you can also educate your people, and we also know that here, therefore, we're getting good people when they come here. So when we help you, we're really only helping ourselves. And so again, it is my honor and my privilege to say to you, welcome to the 6th Congressional District and York College in Queens County. Thank you.
Round of applause for our Congressman. Conversations with people who count, conversations with people who can be counted. We're going to move into another phase of the conversations by hearing from the President of the Republic of Guyana, President Bharrat Jagdeo.
Brothers and sisters from the Caribbean, our American friends, on behalf of my colleagues, I wish to thank you all for being here tonight. Whilst we were in the holding room, we had a discussion. I said I did not want to speak first And I suspected the reason why I was put to open batting is because Chandipal has just moved to #2 in the world in the ICC ranking. So they think that all Guyanese can play cricket. Let me assure you, I'm not much of a cricketer. And I see the Prime Minister of Barbados smiling. And you applauding when Helen Clarke said that her husband is from Barbados. Well, the Prime Minister of Barbados has Guyanese roots too. So his ancestors are from Guyana. And please don't be jealous of it. Colleagues, we have a short time, and we wish that you ask more questions so we can be more pointed in our responses. That's why we don't want to make long speeches here tonight. But we're very happy you're here tonight. And one of the reasons that we are here in New York is to try to bring our diaspora together, to organize it in a fashion that it will understand that it is a great political force within this country. And hopefully to break the insularity that exists between nation states and to forge a collective patrimony that is the Caribbean patrimony. So whilst Barbados is important and Guyana and Jamaica, we're Caribbean people. And if we understand that and we act together as Caribbean people, then it significantly magnifies the power that we will have within this society. We're shamelessly here to try to get people who look like us and who share our views elected in local offices and at the state level and hopefully at the national level so that they can be sympathetic to the cause of the Caribbean. And also to create a better life and a space for Caribbean people who live here in the United States of America. We hope that in November you all should turn out and elect the person who we feel maybe most sympathetic to our views. This is a person that I've seen in an image squatting outside of a small hut that his grandmother lives in Kenya. This is a person who, although he's Christian, and very proud of that, grew up with an understanding of the Muslim faith. Anyone who shares these experiences will understand us better, people from the third world, and will understand our challenges. And we need that kind of person to lead the United States of America. I hope I don't get into trouble for saying this, but I don't mind. We have been very insular in the region for a very long time because we see ourselves as independent states. And maybe that insularity translated in us in many ways, not coming to you here as a collective. Tonight we've changed that. We come as Guyana and meet with our own diaspora. We come as Jamaica and meet with our diaspora. Come as St. Lucia or Grenada. But tonight we want to change all of that. And I hope that when we leave here, that you will seek to forge the closer tie among yourselves, because that tie would help us in the Caribbean, and it would also help you here in the United States of America. Let me give you a few areas in which you can help if you get people elected who are sympathetic to our views. And these are 3 areas of huge challenges to the Caribbean. First of all, the area of trade. It's vital. We are very small societies. We have small internal markets. Our economies cannot be driven by internal trade. We have to export. So it's critical that we get access for our products at a reasonable price. For decades, even before colonial times, we have had our economy structured in a particular way. And we have, in Maine, been selling into preferential markets. This is changing rapidly. with the advent of globalization and trade liberalization. New regimes are being forged, and in spite of our pleas and arguments that countries of different size should have special and differential treatment, these pleas fall on deaf ears. But we need to forge a trade regime that would allow big and small to integrate into the global economy. And the ones that we are seeing now, although we are going into them, we're not sure as to their long-term impact. So if you have people here in the policy-making positions who can influence this, you may be able to fashion a trade regime between the United States of America and the Caribbean that allows us not to get a free lunch, but if we work hard, we will prosper too. And we wouldn't be subjected, like in so many cases. My rice competes with American subsidized rice. You know, so many other problems. Small countries faced with so many distortions in trade. The second area has to do with security. We have, right across the Caribbean, we have seen an upsurge in crime. And we can trace this upsurge in crime, the leap in crime, to the deportation policies of the developed world. What happened? What happened? That when these criminals came in, drug dealers, pedophiles, rapists, murderers, who came back into our societies, they brought back a level of sophistication that we've never seen in the past. With them came the use of heavy weaponry. The transnational nature of the crime was enhanced because they have linkages here in the United States of America. So the crime changed, the nature of the crime changed, and our police forces were caught flat-footed because they were accustomed to a different kind of crime. Today we are in a mad scramble to raise our policing capabilities to tackle the new type of crime. So, and it's very costly and it takes time. Intelligence-driven led crime, more tough measures against criminals. This is ongoing in the region, but you can also help if you elect sympathetic people to let the societies and the powers that be in these societies, in your society, understand the impact of their policy making on our societies. The third area has to do with the environment. We in the Caribbean are very susceptible to adverse weather. One hurricane could wipe us out as much as 80% of GDP in a single country. In Guyana's case, in 2005, we had a flood that wiped out the equivalent of 60% of GDP. Now, today, the science, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, of hundreds of scientists, has demonstrated that there is global warming and that it's affecting the countries that are least capable to handle them and have the capacity to handle global warming most. So you have to struggle for policy. The United States of America did not sign on to the Kyoto Protocol. And we need market-based mechanisms and development assistance for adaptation, so our countries could adapt to climate change. If not, we'd be wiped out in the region, or we will continue to go backwards, because every few years, all the good work we do on accumulating wealth in our societies would be wiped out by extreme weather patterns. So I'm very pleased that all three candidates who are running have suggested that they are going to take climate change. That is running for elections in November. But one man has a better policy than others. It's a cap and trade policy. We don't want a carbon tax. Cap and trade will be good, especially if they can trade carbon credits from our society. So again, climate change is important, it affects us, and it is going to become a huge challenge for Caribbean societies. There are a whole host of problems, smaller problems, and there are many wonderful things that are happening in our societies that sometimes you don't get credit for. I go to Jamaica and I walk around Kingston without any security. But if you look at the image of Jamaica or Guyana, you would think from the time you go there, someone would snatch you and run away with you or kill you. That's the image here. I hope you can change this image of the Caribbean in the diaspora. We don't want you to sweep anything under the carpet. We don't want you to stop criticizing government officials because we're fair game once you're in politics. But we want people to be balanced and have a balanced view of the many wonderful things that are happening in our societies too, along with the problems. Thank you for coming. Thank you.
Thank you, President Jagdeo. From the land of many waters, now we'll hear from the Prime Minister of the land of the Piton.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, Vice President, fellow Prime Ministers, President, Caribbean people, members of the Diplomatic and Consular Corps, good evening. I came with a prepared text, but I was told that it's a conversation, not a lecture. My friend said if got 3 minutes, not half an hour. And therefore, I concluded that the time had come for me to agree with Jagdeo and the others, and to speak from the heart to you, the people of the Caribbean, on the reason why we have come here to address you. We've come here to address you almost apologetically, because for too long our Caribbean leaders have forgotten that our people who left our shores left with the hope of finding a land or lands of greener pastures. We forgot them and felt that they were doing all right, and so they can assist by sending remittances down to our people and developing families out of barrels and hoping that our families will be satisfied with what they're doing for them on an annual basis. In some of our countries, we've gone to the extent of putting in place policies and even arrangements with customs to ensure that on an annual basis, that our people receive their barrels free of taxes and duties and other custom charges. But for all that time, while we're doing all of those things to make our people believe that we're doing good for them, we've failed to recognize that those who left with an intention to better themselves have done so and have gone even far further beyond and have excelled in the many areas of professionalism. And we've lost track of them while they continue to make their contribution to those lands of greener pasture. You heard the Vice President speak, the President, when she spoke tonight. She said she left Jamaica to go to Canada with the hope of returning to Jamaica, but ended up in Queens, Jamaica, Queens. And today, here in these parts, making a contribution to the development of the United States. We Caribbean leaders have recognized that the time has come for us to tap the resources that are available to us from the diaspora. Not merely at election time when we believe we can come to these parts and solicit the support of our Caribbean people to influence the vote in our homelands. Not again. We must not allow our people to be used in that manner, but to see them as people, as nationals returning home and making a positive contribution to social and economic development. My former leader has always said that when a St. Lucian leaves St. Lucia and lands in New York, the United Kingdom, in Canada, Toronto, wherever he or she may end up, he or she must see themselves as St. Lucians and not as a member or supporter of any political party. They must see themselves as St. Lucians and not as a member, simply a member or follower of any particular religion. Because it was only when we get there outside of our homeland that we can understand what it is to be a national of the country from where we come. But the fact that we have come here as leaders, we are further emphasizing the need for us not simply to see ourselves as belonging to one religion, one class, or one creed, or coming from one country, or supporting one political party or the other, or citizen of any particular country, and to be insular about that status, but to see ourselves as Caribbean people committed to making that positive contribution to our community. In the Caribbean today, we do have in our countries great opportunities for our people to return to. Opportunities to make a difference, to change the landscape, and to make us even prouder than we are at this time. This morning, we're meeting with international financial institutions, speaking to them and encouraging them and asking them, how can you assist us in the Caribbean? What contribution can you make to the Caribbean region? And what do we do as governments? We provide all incentives. We create laws to allow them to come in and to invest. We call it foreign direct investment. And we forget that our people are out there also, out there with the capacity to come back and to invest in our own territory and make a difference. We have come to you today to change that. We have come to you to change that, to say we are prepared to listen to you, to understand where you're coming from, to understand what exactly you believe you can contribute to changing the landscape of the region so that we can go back home and do what is necessary to change policy, to change the framework, to put the infrastructure, to put the systems so that you can return and make your contribution to your community. We have, over the years, lost many Caribbean people. They come down and they seek and select our nurses and our doctors and our teachers, and we sit back and we allow it to happen. We have made no effort whatsoever to ask ourselves the question, why are they leaving our shores? And once we can answer those questions, I believe we will be able to change the drift. We call it a brain drain, but we can change it around and make it circulation of intelligence to return to our countries and to make that contribution. I am prepared as Prime Minister for St. Lucia, and hopefully with my other colleagues, as we listen to you this evening, to understand that we all are one Caribbean people, and we as Prime Ministers are prepared to do what is necessary to facilitate your contribution to our respective islands and to the Caricom region as a whole. I believe there is a wealth of resource out there. As I've traveled in the past year, whether to the United Kingdom, to Canada, to New York, to Washington, I'm surprised by the wealth of human resource that lie outside of the region, belonging to the region. We need to tap into that resource. We need to find a way of finding out the location of the resource and to get that resource back home to continue to build our countries. I've just returned from Taiwan in the Asian region, and I'm impressed by what has happened in that country. An island state, though not internationally recognized, but what they have done, they have internationalized their education system. They have invested in their education over the years. They have sent their people out to the United States and Canada and England to be educated and trained, and they are now returning and making a difference to the economy of that country. We can do it too, if only we understand what you are saying to us and what you think can be done to assist. We would like to see ourselves not as nations simply to receive, as I said, the barrels and the remittances, and to be repositories of people of deviant behavior, but we must see ourselves as repositories of the wealth and the resource of the Caribbean region. I want to thank you. I want to thank you for the opportunity that you've granted me here this evening to address you. I will listen attentively to your questions and your contributions, your comments and your interventions, and hope that that in itself will influence me and motivate me to do what is right in my country and to team up with the rest of the leaders to do what is necessary in Caricom to facilitate the diaspora. I thank you.
To use some Caribbean vernacular, so far we've been hearing proper talk. You know, interestingly enough, this is not just conversations, but I'm sensing connections. We heard first from the President of Guyana, where I was born. We heard next from the Prime Minister of St. Lucia, where my grandmother was born and where my wife was born. And now we're hearing from the Prime Minister of Barbados, where my maternal grandfather was born. Prime Minister of Barbados. Ambassador Morris King calls me an alleged Guyanese by way of Barbados. Where's Morris?
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, fellow prime ministers and officials. Let me say how happy I am to be here to participate in this event. And as I was sitting there, I was reflecting on when last I, as a political leader in the Caribbean, had the opportunity to address what one might call a truly Caribbean audience like this. It is true that we live in the Caribbean, but even in the Caribbean, we can't assemble people from the Caribbean in one place, as we've done this evening. So this is a great tribute. That we can, in a sense, touch and feel you, listen to your concerns, and you've heard a lot from us. We actually came here tonight to hear from you. And we look forward very much not only to the contributions that you can make when you leave this room, but more importantly, to some of the issues that you might raise that may be of concern to you and that we can respond to, so that you'd have a better understanding of where we are in the Caribbean, why we are here, what we hope to achieve for our people. And that's important to you because assuming that you are not here permanently and that you want to return to the Caribbean, what you want to know is that you have good leaders in the Caribbean who are doing everything in their power to ensure that the countries that you want to return to are developing and are making progress, that they're safe, they're secure, that they have good health services, good educational services, that their young people are achieving their aspirations and so on. So you have to help us. And one good thing about the Caribbean, we meet people all the time on airplanes, particularly coming out of the United States, and the first thing they tell you is, well, my grandparents were Polish and my aunt is living in Ireland and somebody's from Australia and the Ukraine. Very seldom do they tell you that they're returning to those places. But most of the people we meet from the Caribbean have left, but they want to return home. And therefore you need to be as much involved in what we are doing in the Caribbean as we are involved in it. But while you're here, I think you also have a responsibility, because the Caribbean does have an important agenda. And I don't think that in your daily round and wherever you hold positions of influence and authority, and wherever you can use your diplomacy or your other skills, that you should forget to put the Caribbean case or to support people who you think are going to advance the interests of the Caribbean region. And that is very important. It's important for people living in the, or as part of the diaspora living outside of the Caribbean, to ensure that the decisions that you make, the personal decisions, voting, the kinds of investments that you make, and also the kinds of things that you can influence, always have as their bottom line the advancement of the Caribbean region. And as I said, I think that you've heard a lot from us this evening, and I think it's time now for us to hear from you before the time runs out. So thank you again for inviting me. God bless you.
Thank you, Prime Minister of Barbados. One of the common themes of all the presentations by the Prime Ministers and the President of Guyana is about ways in which we can not just have conversations, but ways in which we can engage electorally, economically influencing policy. But engagement requires organization. I'm delighted now to introduce to you Congresswoman Yvette Clarke from the 11th Congressional District, who will talk a little bit about ways in which the diaspora can be organized to be better engaged, to be better effective at what to do and what we need to do. Congresswoman Yvette Clarke.
Mr. Moderator, Provost, Ivelaw, Griffith, to the Caricom Prime Ministers, Presidents, and Ministers of Government, to all Council Generals and members of the Diplomatic Corps, to Borough President Helen Marshall, to my colleague, Congressman Gregory Meeks, to my former colleague, Councilmember Lloyd, and to all of the various organizations we represented here, to all of our distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, members of the Caribbean diaspora, a pleasant good evening to you all. Good evening. It's certainly my honor and my privilege to be here in the flesh. And I say that to you because you should see me as a reflection of a Caribbean diaspora that has come of age. I am a proud Jamaican. And for the heads of government, that is second generation Jamaican. And that is important to point out. It's important for a number of reasons. When we talk about organizing ourselves and really looking at who we are as a people, we are a people who have emigrated to this nation from a particular region with a particular cultural origin, many of whom have had children and grandchildren. Those children have the citizenship of the United States of America. And many of you have become naturalized citizens of the United States of America. If my mother was here, she would say, "Me anya, but me na banya." But that simply means that we have collected over time a certain power that, when realized, can send someone to Congress. And when you look at the numbers in the 11th congressional race for Congress, those of you who do the number crunching, you will realize, as I do, that it was a particular constituency within the constituency that put me ahead of everyone else. That constituency was a collaborative effort of many who came from the Caribbean region. So I've been asked to talk to you about organizing, and I want you to, now that you see me in the flesh, envision me as a bridge. Because I come to the Hill with a certain amount of intelligence. Not intellect, intelligence. I have been informed by an environment in which so many people from the Caribbean region have cultivated a certain knowledge base. That knowledge base has to do with what happens back home. And with that knowledge base, I now meet with a number of colleagues who are in very important positions. When Congressman Meeks, just in the middle of his conversation, says, "Well, I'm a senior member on the subcommittee of the Western Hemisphere," that's a big thing. That is not something to fly over your head. The committee that he sits on for international affairs means global. It impacts on the policies and the relationships that the United States has with other nations around the world. You see, we are responsible for a domestic agenda, but we drive an international agenda. And so, if you reside in Congressman Meeks' district, you have a say. What you say is up to you. And if you're just talking about passing the time and things look great in the neighborhood and you don't have a complete agenda, the intelligence that he needs, then the type of coming together and building the bridge to cross, to make the difference from the places from whence we've come is not connected. But we're in a great space and time right now. Let me give credit where credit is due to the Dean of our New York delegation, Congressman Rangel, who had a vision that we could make this connection. He had a vision of the constellations lining up the way that they have. And I submit to you that if you are part of any organization today, whether it's a civic organization, a social organization, a high school alumni association, a sports organization, there should be a political arm to those organizations. And I say that with all sincerity. I say that because I see how other ethnic groups have organized their organizations to come and lobby me in Washington for the things that they want done for their homeland. And if you're watching CNN as closely as I am, you will have seen most recently one of the largest, most influential organizations called AIPAC, where our presidential candidates had to go before with their policies towards Israel. Don't clap me if you're not going to work. Don't clap me if I can't see you in Washington with your organization. Don't clap me if after you dialogue here tonight, you don't become enlightened enough and conscious enough to set some time aside to address the very specific agendas. The constellations are lining up. I recognize that there's a man that will be in the White House very shortly that understands the immigrant experience. And with that understanding, we are putting things in place. When I say we, me and my colleagues, we are passing legislation that when the right parts are in place can make a tremendous difference in the lives of the people of the region and indeed the entire hemisphere, because it is global. The EU is not strong today because each individual European island said, go for yours, I'll go for mine. They came together and now their dollar is stronger than ours. Hello, somebody. Let me just close by saying to you, Happy National Caribbean Heritage Month. Let me also say to you that I've set some wheels in motion in Washington, and I wanted to leave this with the leadership here. There's a resolution that was passed in the House of Representatives unanimously by voice vote. It is called the Caribbean Crime Resolution, H-Res 865. This, if used properly, is a tool. This tool can be carried to the State Department that expresses the will of the House of Representatives that says that the U.S. must be compelled to work with Caribbean leadership to ameliorate the impact of deportation. It is based upon the World Bank UN report that came out with the statistics around the crime and what causes it and the remedies for it. So the House of Representatives have spoken. Now we need to connect the dots. You all have been very accustomed to going to the State Department, as well you should, because indeed you're heads of state, you should be dealing with the president. What is unique about the United States of America is that we have 3 co-equal branches. And if we can't get it that way, you can always get it this way. Be conscious of the fact that there is a constituency in central Brooklyn that is part of each and every one of you that elected Yvette Clarke to go to Congress. God bless you and enjoy the rest of the evening.
Congressman Yvette Clarke from the 11th Congressional District. Now we come to the time for the real proper talk. And I'd like to recommend 3 rules of engagement as we transition into the part of the conversation where you get to pose questions as well as make brief emphasis on brief observations. I'd like to invite you to use the microphone. If you can line up, and we'll take a question or 2 from each side. I'd like you to briefly, and emphasis on briefly, introduce yourself. We will take a few questions or comments from each side, and then I'll invite members on the stage, heads and heads of delegation, to give a round of responses. So we'll take 3 from this side, 3 from this side, and then we'll take a round of comments, responses from the heads on the stage. We've got portable wireless microphones for colleagues on the stage. You can just extract them and make your responses. Brevity is the essence of this conversation. Let's have the first colleague on my left.
Yes, good evening, leaders. My name is Chuck Mohan. A few observations I'd like to make first is that out of 17 items on the agenda for this program, 9 of them were closed items. That's number 1. Number 2, none of the Caribbean public relations firm were contacted to help organize this program. No publicity or monies given to, for example, One Caribbean Radio was given to them for any type of publicity. And we're talking now about staying together, all right, as Caribbean people. Obviously, we can't give to a firm that understands tourism but not political organizing. You need to have that, right? A very important kickoff tonight is happening in Brooklyn that should have happened as part of this program. And that is, I am part of a committee that is coming together to petition the Census Bureau to make sure that the Caribbean people are defined as a people, not added to other groups in the nation. And why we are doing that is simply because our representation can increase as a result of the census figures, where congressional districts can either be added, redrawn, etc. And it's important for us. That's the way we can get power as immigrants in this country. I would also like to ask that there has been nothing on the immigration question on the agenda here. And that's extremely important. And I know you may have the excuse that, well, we don't want to get involved in the United States internal politics. But it is a concern of all of you. It should be a concern of all of you because we are your people. And I was happy when President Jagdeo remarked that they're looking for us, some of us, to be elected to different positions in the country. But let's have no illusions about it. There's still an anti-immigrant feeling in this country. And even right here in Queens, there are certain immigrants who are up for election, and the political machinery just stomps on them. Because there are some politicians also who, for example, we had a Guyanese situation in Howard Beach. A family was harassed.
Mr. Mohan, let me invite you to spend just 30 seconds more.
Yes, 30 seconds. And the fact is that none of these politicians came to the assistance of that family. And it was a racial attack. So I want you to think about those things, what I'm saying. And also I'd like to ask the prime ministers, why is it some countries still have the Queen as the head of state? What are we doing about that? I remember asking the Prime Minister of Barbados in a radio program just before he was elected.
10 seconds.
That wouldn't be one of the immediate things that he'll deal with.
Before we get to the second person on this side, let me just share with you, if I can share with you some of what our scientists at York have been able to do. I was not going to do this, but I have to do it. If you go more than 2 minutes, check your pockets and see if your money is still there. We have been able to figure out a way to retrieve your assets from your pockets if you speak too long. Next person.
Good evening, and welcome Prime Ministers from the Caribbean. My name is Wida Duncan. I'm a Jamaican national, naturalized citizen. I came to New York in 1974, and I have several questions for the Caricom group. Number one, is there a plan on the table to have a Caricom currency similar to the EU currency? And the reason I ask, in 1974, when I was a young girl, the Jamaican currency was at a higher value than the American currency, and now it's $70 to $1 American dollar. The other question I have, in terms of the crime issue, are re-engaging the gang leaders and the criminal elements in a dialogue similar to what the IRA and the British did years ago, and apparently now they have a peaceful union. And we have Irish people going back to Ireland, their economy is booming. The next question I have is about the Americanization of the Caribbean. So we have this global economy, and so I feel as if we're losing our individual souls, because now, you know, when I go to Jamaica, when I grew up, there was one TV station that went on at 3 o'clock and it went off at midnight. And now I go, you have cable stations, you can watch every American show, you know what's going on with the basketball game that happened a few days ago. What are we doing to retain our individuality as Caribbean nations? And
10 seconds.
The last question. We have the brain drain that happened, that we have a lot of families who have children who were left alone with grandma and grandpa. There's a psychological scar on the minds of the people who were left behind. What are we doing to address that? Thank you.
Thank you. Let's take 2 questions or comments on this side. We're limiting them to 2 minutes each, and then we'll take a round of responses from the platform.
Yes, good evening. My name is Colin Moore. I'm editor-in-chief of the Caribbean American Weekly, and I'm also professor at Lloyd College. This is directed to the panel. Every year, gentlemen, it's great. First of all, welcome to New York. Welcome to the diaspora. Every year you come here and you ask, you speak about the contribution of the diaspora. But the problem is when it comes to producing for the diaspora, you gentlemen are sincerely lacking. In other words, you talk the talk, but you don't walk the walk. In other words, when it comes to taking money out of your pocket and retaining public relations firm, you will spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to retain the Rue de Fins and the other big public relations firms on Park Avenue, and yet you do not retain Caribbean firms, as Chuck Mohan correctly says. But let me tell you, gentlemen, one thing, that the largest cultural extravaganza that is put up every year, the Labor Day Parade, is put up by ordinary citizens from the Caribbean, people like Carlos Lozano, people who don't have the background of a Rue de Fin on Park Avenue, but who have been successfully able every year to bring millions of people on Eastern Parkway. So when you say that we don't have the qualifications, you are wrong. We do have the qualifications. We do have the necessary contacts with the members of the diaspora, and we have been successfully able to put on a tremendous cultural event. So I'm saying that you can invest in us. We may not have the name recognition of a Rue de Fin, but believe me, we have the vital contacts with the members of the diaspora. So my question to you is, why do you not invest in us?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Wida, your question concerning the common currency is one that has been put on the table. It forms part of the overall consideration under the CSME, but it is among the most challenging because in order to achieve that, you have to have harmonization of your economy and your legislation. Legislative harmonization is among the greatest challenges of the entire Caricom as a community. And until those legislative provisions are made in each member state, it will remain a significant challenge. Instead, what we are collectively doing is pursuing other aspects of integration, such as the common movement of labor, free movement of labor, not only at the professional level, but also later on at other levels, so that we can interact more directly at the workplace from within the region. The next thing is the movement of capital. Only today at the stock exchange they asked us, and we indicated that is our intention down the road to have a common stock exchange, so that capital from across the region can benefit in terms of providing the resources necessary to build enterprises. So, in addition to other aspects of integration, such as a common strategy for promoting investments and a common strategy to work with the diaspora across the region. That's why we're here tonight dealing with all aspects of all areas that we have to deal with in terms of the diaspora, brought them all together. So those are some of the things that we are doing to strengthen the community. And in terms of the currency, that is a challenge that we will have to cope with once we get through with some of the more pressing things and the more immediate things and the more easily achieved elements of the integration process. In terms of engaging criminals, I know that other prime ministers, the other prime ministers who are here will wish to comment on that, but for our part, we are facing enormous challenges with crime, and that is one of the reasons why I have to apologize for the absence of the Honorable Bruce Golding, the Prime Minister of Jamaica, who at this very moment is engaged in dialogue with aspects of the private sector and also the human rights representatives in the country to deal with some of the legislative measures and amendments that are going to have to be enacted in order to give the police force more teeth and to be more effective in apprehending criminals and keeping them in jail. So the question of having engagements with criminals, we have declared war on gun crimes. And anyone found with a gun must understand what the consequences are. So we're trying through this new strategy to make the gun the enemy of any gunman or criminal who wishes to use it for his own purposes. I wonder if I should pause there and let...
Well, thank you. I think Carl adequately addressed the issue of a common currency. And most of you would appreciate how difficult it has been for the European Union to adopt a single currency. It requires a high level of coordination, and now they have 3 sets of targets. That is inflation target for the new and the areas covered by the currency. They have a target of debt to GDP and fiscal deficit to GDP. Now that's a very difficult set of policies to get commonality on among Caricom countries. So it's not just the legislative coordination, but policy coordinations in some very difficult areas. We have different structures of economies, we have different debt to GDP ratios, we have different current exchange rate regimes. Some are fixed, some are floating, some are managed float. So it is a big undertaking, but this is the final task, as Carl correctly pointed out, of the CSME. And we've set 2015 as the date when we should bring the single economy into being. On the question of negotiating with criminals, I think you need to send a clear signal to the security forces that you're going to be strong against the criminals. Ireland was a little different. They had a political cause, but in this case it's pure criminalities. You shouldn't be talking to drug dealers and murderers and rapists. You should be trying to lock them up or putting them away for a long while. I don't agree with that. And frankly speaking, I don't agree with it, because you send mixed signal to the security forces. If they see me as the president of my country negotiating with criminals, the next day that the policeman goes on the road, he would say, Jagdeo is meeting with this criminal, or he's negotiating with him. It might be hard if I shoot at him, or if I arrest him, political figures for cover. You need to send an unequivocal message that there will be no negotiation. So clear signal to the security forces. Thank you.
We'll take one final comment from the stage and then we'll go back to the audience.
Yes, thank you very much, if I may. Just briefly, on the question of the single currency, I mean, I'm in full support of the observations made, but I just want to point out that in the sub-region, the OECS territories, we were able to create a common currency, the EC dollar. So at least we have an example in the region already that shows that it is possible. Clearly there are challenges going forward in terms of creating that one single Caricom currency. But certainly it is work in progress. It must happen if we are going to make CSM and CSME a reality in the future. Just quickly, there was some comment about the Americanization of the Caribbean. And I suppose the sister from Jamaica is looking at it from a cultural standpoint, and to what extent we may be losing some of our own cultural attributes on the platform of modernization. And I'm quite sure that this is a matter that all of us as leaders in the Caribbean are pretty conscious of. There are things that are uniquely Caribbean that we must ensure that those things remain. At the same time, however, we are in a pretty open society and we are significantly influenced by what happens around us, and more particularly what happens up north. And a lot of our people are influenced by your very existence here. I think what we need to look at is the question of whether we are not taking on more of the vices of American society than the virtues of American society. And I believe if we look at it from that standpoint, we'll be able to make the difference. The virtues are clearly there. That's what we need to stress, that it can influence and make us better people in the Caribbean, rather than adopting more often the vices of American society.
Thank you. In order that we may maximize the time we've got and allow as many colleagues in the audience to be able to participate.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, someone said I needed to identify myself. Baldwin Spencer, Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda.
Thank you, Prime Minister. We will now have a 1 minute, 2 questions maximum rule. After 1 minute, you need to cede the microphone to someone else. There's a very long line on this side, a very long line on that side. Let's go for the first person on my left.
Good evening, Prime Ministers. My name is Douglas Mayers. I must say hello to my Prime Minister from Barbados. He represents my district where I come from in St. John. And I must also recognize Prime Minister Spencer. I was in Antigua last year, and he was very kind to me and my wife, and we joined at the Memorial Day Parade. Thank you. My questions to the Prime Ministers and President on the podium is, I noticed Caricom is not together. The Caribbean islands and ministers are not together because I follow Caribbean politics very closely. And for instance, when Antigua had their problem here with the United States at the World Court, I did not see the support really coming from Caricom for Antigua at the World Court with the American government and what America tried to do with Antigua. All right, that's number one. Number two, lobbyists, the Caribbean, as my friend said before, Colin Moore, the Caribbean pay a lot of white lobbyists in this country to lobby for them. And the best lobbyists the Caribbean could have is using what they got here from the Caribbean, especially people who's involved here in this country in the political system. And I always talk about that with my former Prime Minister of Barbados, and I said the same thing to the present Prime Minister now.
Let's take one more on this side, and then we go to my right. Keep in mind, we've got 1 minute, 2 questions max to work with.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, and my name is Patrice Senior. I'm a resident of Brooklyn, Kings County, and I'm here to say that as a voter and a member of a human being, and been living in Brooklyn over 25 years, I cannot find a council person, anyone in government to go to have your problem solved. I have lived in my apartment, a rent-stabilized apartment in Brooklyn for over 25 years. And a marshal from here in Queens, New York, Bruce Frankenberg, badge number 30, came all the way to Kings County, put me out on the streets in the dead of winter. He not only searched my apartment, but he took my apartment and everything that I have worked for. I have been on the streets for 3 years, 4 months, and 23 days. I have gone to Borough President Martin Markowitz, he did nothing. I've gone to the DA Charles Hines, who is the district attorney of Kings County. They have people working in that office, he did nothing. I've been to the Attorney General Elliot Spitzer's office, he did nothing. I've been to Council Betsy Godbum, who is supposed to be the public advocate, she did nothing. I've gotten so many cards, nobody has done anything.
Why don't we take just 10 seconds more?
I cannot even find a police report, and this landlord, Michael Rothenberg, has all my property, my personal documents, everything. everything that I've worked for all my life. I have nothing, and they have now been using my name in an identity theft. I'd like some help from somebody, and I'd like somebody to know what I can do.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Let's go for my right. Go to my right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hey, I know there's a big problem in terms of with the oil prices. What plans are in place in terms of agriculture, in terms of feeding ourselves is very important. I think this oil thing has brought it up front and center. Second, there's a lot of talk, but in terms of action, what is happening in terms of political union in Caricom? C, transportation. There was some talk about going back to using ships because the way how the oil prices is going, we're going to have to walk on water. Air Jamaica's privatizer, Liat is in problems. What plans are in place for transportation? And last question, and President Jagdeo brought it up. I'm a firm believer, and everybody say I'm crazy, I'm wicked. I'm a firm believer in capital punishment. What plans are in place to re-establish, and the Privy Council had something to do with capital punishment. I think we're too poor in society to have young men in jail for 30, 40 years when those resources could be used to do something else.
Please proceed, ma'am.
My name is Debbie Timecook, and I'm a business consultant. I have my own business in Brooklyn, and I also lead every week a group of business owners and nonprofit executives who run nonprofit organizations where we share ideas on business and how to access government resources and deal with big business in the international arena. I want to say that I'm absolutely thrilled to be here. I wasn't going to come because I thought it's another more talk and more pictures. But my Prime Minister from Barbados, former Congressman, I'm glad to see him here. But my question are these. President Jagdeo spoke about three main issues: trade, security, and environment. Stephen King spoke about the infrastructure and systems and loss of resources to the United States and other areas. We just heard from this woman speaking about her loss of her apartment. That's gentrification. How do all of these things connect? And how can we, through this dialogue, help each other not only here in the diaspora in the United States, but in the Caribbean? And to move forward, we need to understand where we came from. We are primarily descendants of chattel slavery. And we have to address and recognize that's who we are. And understand how people and organizations work and what systems of production, how they do work. Please hold on a moment. How they work. We do not have the systems in place. We speak about trade and security and environment. We don't have the distribution systems here. We don't have the businesses here. Yes, we send the barrels down and the money down. We send the fish, but we don't teach you how to fish. We're not taught how to fish. We're given things.
Thank you very much.
So with the diaspora, how do we interact with in Caribbean and here, having the distribution systems for those products? There are a lot of Caribbean and tropical products that we don't get here. They come here, but they don't come from the Caribbean. So, you know, they come from Costa Rica and other areas, and there are other people who are selling them to us. So, my question is, my question is,
Can I interrupt you one question?
Yes. My question is,
Can I interrupt you for 1 minute?
Yes, go ahead.
You have 10 seconds left.
Okay, my question is, what are we going to do, the panel here, or prime ministers and people here, what are we going to do to engage here? Because we've sent the resources there. What do you want to give us here to put it in place as other nations have done, whether they be from Italy, from Korea, or Israel? Their nations have done it. What do you want to do here so we can have the trade to eliminate the crime? Because the problem with crime is poverty. To eliminate that.
There were several questions. There were several things that were asked. The first had to do with agriculture by the gentleman from St. Vincent. We have a regional agricultural strategy which we put together. We recently hosted a donors conference. In Guyana, about 2 weeks ago, we had an agricultural investment forum bringing the bankers of the region together with the agribusinesses and governments, hoping to forge projects that will give effect to the strategy. The strategy is focused on two objectives: food security and making our agriculture internationally competitive. That's in the short term. Political union. In the terms of political union, different countries have different opinions. I doubt whether it's going to happen in the short term. That's my reading. Other countries may differ on this. The issue of, I think she mentioned something about trade and products getting into the US. I just want to say one thing for you, and this is very selfish. If you see any sugar named Demerara sugar coming from any other part of the world, don't buy it. It's made in Guyana, and a place called Guyana in Demerara. So make sure, I know most of you buy Demerara sugar from Mauritius without knowing that Demerara is a part of Guyana. And the last one, again, very selfishly, when we talk about cultural penetration, I want to invite all of you to Carifesta in Guyana, the last 10 days of August. That is a showcase of our regional culture, festival of arts and culture. So if we want to preserve the culture, we must stand to support it too. Thank you.
Thank you, President Jagdeo. Let's have one more on this side, and then we'll go.
First, I must congratulate President Jagdeo on the wonderful job he's doing in Guyana, on the price subsidies and for the prices, the rising food prices in Guyana. Thank you very much, President Jagdeo. I have two comments. One, on Caricom's
We will
policy.
take one comment. We will take one comment.
I said to time you. Okay. Time you, you're interrupting me. One on Caricom's policy in Africa, one for Congressman Gregory Meeks. I believe Caricom's policy on Africa has been very miserable, especially on Zimbabwe. And I think that you people should be a little more proactive, especially on what is happening in that particular country in respect to President Mugabe and his policy on democracy. Now, the second comment I have is a request to Congressman Gregory Meeks. I only met Congressman Gregory Meeks once.
Thank you very much for that comment. Let's go to the second person, the person behind you.
I said,
Holly, could you step away from the microphone? We need to be able to move on. Thank you.
Excellencies, all honorable people all, greetings. My name is Adelina St. Clair, and I am from the Caribbean first, specifically from St. Lucia. I am a United States citizen, all of it the Americans. I come here before the people and before the leadership to say two things. Without the Caribbean taking care of the coastal areas, specifically the degrading reefs that exist in some islands, you cannot think of development in a sustainable fashion. Precisely, I have spent the past more than that, 30 years, but the past 5 years dealing with all the issues on the environment as it relates to the global climate and as it relates specifically to the Caribbean, who has been dumped on by those who are more developed and should pay for it, which I have written that on all the blogs that I do and tell them that when I get a chance at the United Nations, whenever I'm around. I'm saying this because although we come to New York to deal with the financial areas, I hear people talking about having a Wall Street with, a stock exchange with paper. They should carefully check what is going on with the finances, because I would like to see a commodities exchange also, because the cell phone is ubiquitous even in the Caribbean, and the people can be taught how to do business directly with the commodities they have. Food presently is gold. check what happened in the New York Times about 2 weeks ago on their front page, and you will know that Wall Street is now trading in foods. We also need to teach the Caribbean people how to appreciate the value of the nutrition that they get from their own Caribbean foods and to be creative with it to stop the disease factor. I thank you all. Anything more I have to say, I'll put it in on paper. And also, I want the Caribbean people to be mindful of the leadership that we want no garbage dumped on the Caribbean. They say you cannot fight City Hall. I say yes. They had a conference after I went behind them not to send garbage to the Caribbean because we went everywhere to the media immediately to get it done, and the Caribbean people signed it. No garbage to be dumped on the Caribbean people, ever.
Thank you very much. Let's have two on that side, and then we'll take a round of comments from the stage.
We have an issue pertaining to, number one, we have all the ambassadors. They never come together and meet with a common ground for people to solve problems. That's number one. This is the first time we see all the Prime Minister in Brooklyn. I wish you could have the constant over and over to meet the people's needs on day-to-day issues. We have health issues in the Caribbean and Africa, and we have 5 people at the UN making decisions for the whole world. We need to stop that. That's one of my questions for all the Prime Minister. Number 2 is our health issues. We have health issues pertaining to women's gender and infant mortality. It's one of the biggest problems around the world. Nobody talks about that. So we need to face that issue right away and come right back to health and agriculture. You get land mass and you're not planting food. You need to have the farmers in order and give them land free to make food grow in the country as well as multiplication. So reach on that problem and solve it.
Thank you. One more on this side, and then we'll take a round of comments from the stage.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Kay Neal. I'm a theater professional and a lecturer here at York. First, let me thank everybody up on the panel, all our honorees, especially my Prime Minister, Mr. Stephenson King. One of the things I wanted to say was that when vision and instead of using our negative energy, like, talking about everything negative right now, one of the things I really wanted to do was to thank him. In January, I went up to his office and explained why it is that the Caribbean, as a Caribbean community, does not do more forums like this. And so number one, I'm kind of really glad that this is happening here at York. And number 2, I really wanted to address, I saw one woman on the platform, obviously, and what are we doing? What are the Caribbean heads of state doing to really encourage more females in politics? And so we can see more, at least a little more diversity on board. And the last thing I'm going to say is that, seriously, for everybody here, instead of really, a lot of times I know we always diss y'all because we're here and we know the human resources that's in the Caribbean represented in New York, and we don't use them. We really don't use them. And I guess that's what this is all about. So pretty much, we need to get together to have more forums like this, but not only to dialogue, but to implement whatever comes out here. So I must thank you, because at least this is number 1 at York, and I'm very glad to be part of it.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I will speak about healthcare because I spent most of my time in healthcare. And we spoke this evening about the brain drain of the professionals from the various countries. We need to readdress the healthcare issue, and I'll speak for Barbados because I don't know of the other countries, so that what are the plans of the new government of readdressing both the education of the healthcare system in Barbados and an interrelationship between developed countries so we can have a consultant relationship to foster that education to bring us up to the level of a developed country. Thank you.
Good evening.
I am an Antiguan national, and I'd just like to bring something to the attention of the persons here, and I hope that what I'm going to share that you are aware of it. I am an educator by profession. Could you not interrupt me, please, and let me speak? I am an educator by profession, and I'm not certain if the heads of government are aware that teachers from the Caribbean have been removed from the classroom. They're being warehoused in Brooklyn. They sit there every day, they do nothing. We run the risk of losing our credentials, losing our jobs. We sit there from Monday to Friday, 6-7 hours on trumped-up charges, from incompetence to hitting children. Nothing that has ever happened. We await hearings with lawyers that are provided by the union, by the Board of Education, and I want to know what the heads of government can do in this situation for teachers from the Caribbean who have been removed from the classroom and run the risk of losing their careers.
Thank you. We'll go to that microphone and we'll take two and then come to the stage. Please proceed.
Yes. My name is Justice Kenneth L. Thompson, Jr. I am a resident of Boogie Down, Bronx. My parents are from the Bahamas. I am affiliated with the Bahamian American Association and the Bahamian Cultural Society. My question to the heads of states and ministers are, with regards to investment, there seems to be a lot of impediments towards people engaging in investments, particularly when someone might have capital like land that they might be a co-venture with. Is there a mechanism where an organization like Caricom could establish some sort of apparatus where they could guarantee, like the person in the indigenous countries in the Caribbean that contribute capital towards an investment with a foreign co-venture will be insulated or insured if the co-venture walks away, like i.e. The foreign investor posting something like a breakup fee like people do with mergers in that respect? Is there some sort of mechanism that Caricom is thinking about engaging in like that to facilitate foreign investment so that people in the Caribbean can be insured that if a breakup does happen, they will be insured from possible loss?
Thank you. We'll take one more on this side and then we'll go to the stage for some comments.
Good night. I would like to greet you as a Caribbean national in the name of peace and unity. The Prime Minister of St. Lucia made quite a few statements that I find very interesting, and that is why I came up here. Normally I don't do this kind of thing. But he asked a question, what can we in the diaspora do to transform the Caribbean? And he went on to say that we can return and make a contribution. But what was important to me is that he said that you, the leaders, will do everything to facilitate our efforts, and that you would like to tap into our resources or at least find a mechanism to tap into our resources. I would like to let you know that there is an organization, the International Consortium of Caribbean Professionals, that has been formed to do just what you have asked, to mobilize the Caribbean professionals throughout the diaspora to facilitate our working together in collaborative relationships and building partnerships, and to link the professionals in the diaspora with professionals in the Caribbean for similar purposes. So I just wanted to bring this to your attention to let you know that there is an instrument that would like to work with Caricom and through Caricom to achieve these goals and objectives. And I'd like to know how you, our leaders, can assist.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Let's go to the stage for a round of comments, responses. Any of the heads of delegation, including our Deputy Secretary General of Caricom.
Mr. Chairman, may I start with the last one? In terms of the International Association of Caribbean Professionals, one of the strategies that has to be employed by the entire region is to establish what you call a skills bank, so that we at least know where all the professionals in the diaspora are. What is without doubt is that the diaspora, all from the entire region, are better off where they are than those who are at home. They enjoy a higher standard of living, they enjoy a higher per capita income. They are in great part far more, have received more training, and they have a lot to contribute. I know, speaking for Jamaica, we are actively attempting to recruit professionals from among the diaspora. That's our first choice. We go to the diaspora wherever we can identify that skill and encourage them to come home. And it would be very useful if the gentleman who spoke, obviously he must be a high-ranking member of that organization, if he could communicate with the Caricom Secretariat and advise them as to the exact location of his membership so that we can draw on that as a resource base.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if I may, just to speak to that issue raised by my fellow Antiguan, who presumably is a teacher and maybe facing some difficulties. My understanding is that this matter has been drawn to the attention of the Consul General here, and efforts are being made to address that issue. However, I would certainly take the opportunity to, after this session, to have a word with the individual and for us to see what methodology we can put in place to deal with that specific matter.
Yes, I want to respond to the gentleman who last spoke on the issue of the International Consortium of Caribbean Professionals and to commend him on the initiation of that particular body. I would be particularly interested to establish some links with your organization from the St. Lucia standpoint, but I believe through Caricom also we can do this sort of thing. There are a number of ways we can utilize such an organization. In fact, St. Lucia for sure, at this time, we have approached the Commonwealth Secretariat to assist us in doing a review of our foreign offices, generally to assist us in repositioning those offices to respond to the challenges that we are faced on the international scene, to see whether we are getting value for money, whether the output is there, and whether we are responding to international challenges. And in some instances, we tend to go to international organizations and other bodies and bypass the capabilities that we have from the Caribbean that exist in first world countries that we can utilize to assist us in doing a number of undertakings in the interest of our countries. And I do hope that we can utilize some of the expertise that you have in the various areas to assist us in some of the initiatives that we'd like to take on in St. Lucia. Just quickly to respond to one on the environment, I believe that most Caricom countries have recognized the importance of the environment, and in a number of countries, the environment, the portfolio of the environment, forms a major part of ministries, and no longer are they just simply desk officer, but in a number of territories, we do have ministries with a portfolio called the environment, dealing with the environment. In St. Lucia, one of the things we've been very successful in is to designate certain areas as environmentally friendly areas. And two instances, one is the area called the Piton Management Authority, which has now received what is called World Heritage Site status. And another one is the Soufrière Management Marine Authority, which was established sometime in 1995 to monitor and to manage not just the use of the marine environment, but also to put in place the necessary policies in terms of the usage of the environment. So these are areas that we certainly are very keen about. Every investor coming to St. Lucia, and I do know that it exists in other territories, every investor coming in, major investor, must do an environmental impact assessment to ensure that it does not impact negatively on the environment. Because we recognize that as much as we'd like to attract foreign investment, as much as we'd like to bring in the big hotels, we do not want to compromise the environment and our natural beauty. And that is very important to us.
Any other comments from the stage?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Good evening, nationals in the diaspora. There were a couple of questions which I thought I should not allow to simply pass without comment. Good evening, nationals in the diaspora. There were a couple of questions which I thought I should not allow to simply pass without comment. One sought some information on what is being done against certain chronic and lifestyle diseases. Those are things that, of course, develop sometimes naturally because of the realities of human existence. However, for your information, perhaps I can say that we in Trinidad and Tobago at least established something called the Chronic Disease Assistance Program, by which every national who is afflicted with high blood pressure, diabetes, HIV, and a number of other diseases of that nature receives treatment and medication free of charge from the government of Trinidad and Tobago. Secondly, someone inquired about Caricom's policy in Africa. To date, a unified policy perhaps has not yet been developed. Historically, Caricom countries have operated on the basis that we do not interfere in the internal politics of sovereign states. We join at the United Nations to take collective action when necessary. In other areas, however, we have sought to assist or to cooperate with our African brothers and sisters in areas where we perceive that we have some level of expertise. In this regard, Trinidad and Tobago at least has provided free technical cooperation to several African countries, including Equatorial Guinea, Nigeria, Uganda, Tanzania, in the development of energy resources and the monetization of those resources. And teams of experts from Trinidad and Tobago have visited those countries to collaborate with the authorities in those countries in terms of that economic development, so that something is being done to strengthen the bonds of collaboration between Africa and we in the Caribbean. And finally, from this side, I cannot claim to be a politician. But I know that the politicians did not address a particular question that was answered, or that was asked. Why are there not more women in politics? That is the concern of the electorates in each particular country. When your electorates decide to elect women, then you will see women in political office. It is quite simple. From our point of view, in our last election, we have elected an unprecedented number of women into our parliament, the highest in our history, and they occupy now very important and solid positions in the cabinet of the country. The Attorney General, the Minister of Finance, the Minister of Planning, the Minister of Housing, the Minister of the Environment, all are female. So steps have been taken. Thank you.
Thank you, Harold. Ambassador Sears.
I wish to make a comment on the question raised concerning investment. And the Caricom has arrangements to facilitate investments from the diaspora. Most of you would know that most countries have investment regimes, and most countries have an investment infrastructure which looks at an appraisal investment proposals. And a lot of it depends on the merits of the particular case. I would certainly suggest that the guidelines, most of us have guidelines, investment guidelines, so you need to make yourselves familiar with those guidelines, and the investment authority which examines and evaluate projects would look at projects, and we are particularly sensitive to projects coming from the diaspora, so that's something you should really pursue. On the question of Zimbabwe, the foreign ministers met in Antigua and Barbuda under the chairmanship of Prime Minister Spencer last month, and they did make a statement on Zimbabwe, so you should know that as well. And if you consult the Caricom website, you'll see the communique speaking to the issue of Caricom foreign minister's position on Zimbabwe. The lady raised a question on trade and the difficulty of getting commodities in the United States. That's a real issue. It involves different challenges. First of all, it involves the ability of groups to actually create business enterprises. Then from the manufacturing point of view, the standards which goods are now required to enter the US market is a challenge, but it is something we need to do, because I believe personally that possibility, great possibilities exist to not only bring our goods into the US market, but also to increase employment opportunities in our particular region. Thank you, Chairman.
I am Hector John, from the Commonwealth of Dominica, student at Monroe College. 2 questions. I hope that Mr. King will answer, Stevenson King, and anybody from the banana countries. Currently, there's a problem with WIPDECO, fair trade, WINFA, and the DBGs in the islands. What are the governments in these islands are doing, or Caricom is doing, to really solve that problem with the banana farmers within the islands? And my second question is pertaining to students. How many of the leaders really interact or keep in contact with the students in the diaspora? That is why most of them are not going back home. I was president of one of the groups at my school, and that is one of our biggest problems. Our islands do not keep in contact with our students, and that's why we're losing them. And Mr. King speaks about reverse brain drain. That is one of our problems. That's where we should start. Keep in contact with our students. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person. That's a good model to follow. Short and sweet.
Yesterday, there was a proclamation signed dealing with education. I want to thank the leaders for putting that together. But there's an issue that was mentioned, and a comment was mentioned about certain initiatives that may be taken to make that not happen. This needs to be taken seriously, and I don't know if a study was done on open admissions. This college was free. City University was free until open admissions came about. Black, Latino, and many of them were from the Caribbean. Numbers raised dramatically after that strong, hard struggle in the 60s. Then came tuition. And on top of the tuition, you had Reagan, Nixon, and Bush 1, and now Bush 2, doing all kind of things where if a student drops a class, they're deported. This is going on. If you're supposed to carry a certain course load, if you're a foreign student. And what Bush did recently after 9/11, while everybody was going around saying 9/11, 9/11, and not paying attention to what's going on to being happening to the diaspora, if you drop a class, you can be deported. You're in danger of being deported. Unfortunately, shamefully, there are many of us in the diaspora that are struggling around education. And I know about that teacher's situation. It's called the rubber room. I understand it very well. Unfortunately, there are things going on, and before you do these agreements, you need to speak to the activists in the community who are cut off from television, who are cut off from radio. The elites are shaking hands with the Bushes. They don't care. Please look into that.
Thank you.
And the reduction in minority business.
Thank you.
The reduction in minority business affects what the gentleman was talking about you not hiring your own. Bloomberg has cut out a lot of minority business. A lot of them are owned by Canadian nationals, and you can then have cross-business like the marketing for this situation here.
Thank you very much. Let's go to the other mic to take two.
My name is Julianne Hudson. I'm a Guyanese and I'm a proud student of York. I wanted to know, I'm sorry I missed the earlier presentation on education, but I had an exam that day. You're in an educational institution, you were at Medgar Evers. Medgar Evers as well as York is heavily populated by Caribbean students. Something similar to what my colleague earlier had mentioned. We have a huge Caribbean population that are coming to school here. What are you as heads of government? You're talking about investment opportunities and trying to regain the human resources that left. But what are you doing to attract students like myself, students like my husband, who are here, but we would like to return back home to work? But there's no one here that is connecting with us to say what opportunities there are. And I think that's something that the Caribbean community, as individual countries, need to address. Not only individually, but collectively. What are you doing to connect with us as students gaining an education who would be qualified to do the things that I think would help to build your individual countries?
Thank you. We take the second person and then we go to the stage for some comments, responses.
Good evening, my name is Freddie Mae Miller and I'm from Belize. And we're happy to welcome our Prime Minister here tonight. And to see that he's part of Caricom. I think Caricom has done wonderful things for the Caribbean. And the only thing that I would like to address tonight is, will there ever be on the agenda for Caricom an absentee ballot where us that are living in the States can vote? I am very convenient. I want to vote.
I see that there are even individuals from my own particular constituency that I've had the pleasure of, thank you, that I've had the pleasure of representing for 25 years now. I just want to say that I certainly am privileged to be part of what's taking here tonight. I know that sometimes because of Belize's geographic location in Central America, people wonder about the possibility of schizophrenia. Duality certainly on our part. I want to make it clear that while we do in fact belong to and participate in the mechanisms for the Central American integration system, Caricom is our first love, and you all know what the deal is with first love. In terms of the specific question about an absentee ballot, it's something that we have to work towards. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it in principle. In fact, let me put it far more positively. I certainly support it in principle. There are clearly difficulties having to do with logistics and the monitoring process that would have to be worked out. But there's nothing that with the correct will we can't achieve, so it's coming. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Any other comments from the stage? Any other replies, responses? Dr. Robertson?
Pull it.
Thank you again, Mr. Moderator. I want to address two issues that have been raised in the most recent round of questioning. One I know will not please the audience, but that is the reality. So I will deal with the easier one first. Contact with students. Your representatives, and certainly this representative, makes every effort to encourage
and to keep in contact with students and students' organizations wherever they are in our jurisdictions. But we cannot simply leave our offices and go to anywhere and take a line to meet students. Students must have an organization, and having had an organization, you invite us for a particular day or reasons, and we negotiate until there's a convenient, mutually convenient date and time, and we go there. I know that the previous Consul General of Jamaica, Consul General of Barbados, and others and myself, we have been slipping and sliding in snows all over New England to get together with our students in the middle of winter. I have gone to Buffalo to meet our students. I've gone to New Jersey to meet students. I go all over the state of New York to meet students. So wherever the students are, once we are invited to meet with you, we are prepared to make it happen. And indeed, I think it was 2 years ago, the Honorable Prime Minister traveled from Trinidad and Tobago specifically to address Caribbean students at MIT up in Boston. We make efforts to contact and to recruit and to invite our students to participate in the development of the region. So I want to plead not guilty. And now, if I may have the permission of Prime Minister Bharrat, Prime Minister Manning, unfortunately, could not be here this evening. However, we anticipated that the matter of whatever you call it, overseas voting, absentee ballot, or whatever, would have arisen. And the Prime Minister wanted the position of Trinidad and Tobago to be pellucid and absolutely clear. There will not be absentee voting in Trinidad and Tobago. Straightforward and clear. If we want to discuss the reasons, we can do that afterwards on the stage and explain the rationale. But I know that time is not on our side, so I just thought I would put the statement boldly and boldly before you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Please.
Hello? Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I want to touch on a question with regard to the banana issue. I think it's a very important issue for the Caribbean, but not only for the Caribbean, also for Africa. Earlier, some of you spoke about support to Africa. It's an ACP issue. As you may know, we not so long ago initially signed an EPA with the European Union. And although it was very difficult for the Caribbean countries to come to a common position, we did reach a common position and we could sign the EPA. What we are facing now is that due to WTO rules, our position is becoming a little bit difficult because of the fact that we can get more competition of non-ACP countries, namely Central America and other countries. It is a serious issue because we can lose, people will lose their job. We'll have less income for the banana industry. But that's why we are fighting seriously to see that we do not come in that position. It is because of a tariff of 176 euro per ton that they want to bring down. And we are saying that if that is the case, we're going to face some difficulties. But if, due to the WTO rules, we have to bring it down, then we want to bring it down no lesser than 160 euros per ton. It is a difficult issue, but you may be sure that we will fight that issue. And we told Pascal Lamy that we are not willing to support the conclusion of the Doha round if that case is not fixed. So be sure that we are fighting for a good position when it regards banana. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister of Trade of Suriname, Minister Clifford Marita.
On Friday, May 30th, the southern region of Belize was hit by Tropical Storm Arthur. The destruction was estimated at $63 million of infrastructure, bridges, crops, and private citizens of this disaster. Now, I know that if there was a drug bust, it would be all over the news. How can Caricom help to get information to all the Caribbean people in the United States and globally so that we can get help when there's a national disaster for our respective countries?
Let's take one more on this side and then we'll go to my right.
You said that you cannot meddle in the affairs of a sovereign state. Yes, that is so. But of course you can show your approval or disapproval in many other ways. Carifest is coming up. Look at the state. That brings me to the crime situation in Guyana. You can show your disapproval. How can you sleep at night? How can you go to Guyana? How can you go to Caricom when the crime rate in Guyana has been so high? Mr. President, tell me.
10 seconds more, please.
Yes. Why hasn't the report on torture in Guyana, why hasn't that report been published yet? Can you answer that question? The United States investigation into the Roger Can affair said that has implicated the Guyana government in the Roger Can, who is now sitting in the prisons in the United States. The Guyana government has been implicated. The former Home Affairs Minister, Ronald Gadraj, the former Commissioner of Police, Henry Green, all of them have been bedfellows with you as President of the Republic of Guyana. Answer me those questions, please, Mr. President. How can you sit there among those men of esteem? Answer those questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let's have two on that side and then we'll take a round of comments.
I brought my wife to the United States and she got a green card. She got papers. I went to St. Lucia. I fell in love with the country to buy land. I was being treated as a foreigner. Have to pay an additional 10% cost because I have to sit in St. Lucia for 6 months before I can obtain St. Lucia citizenship or some type of identification in St. Lucia to own land, when my wife got what she wanted in the United States within 6 days. That's one. Mr. Jagdeo, there's a lot of people in the United States that's involved in crime that's from the Caribbean. Even though you use a consulting agency, also consult with the Caribbeans about crime. When kids graduate school in the Caribbean after they're not going to college, do what the Europeans do. Put them in the damn military. That way the gang leaders won't get them and put them into the gangs and become gang members. If they're loitering on the streets, do what one of the founding members of Caricom, Mr. Burnham, used to do. Put them in the GDF, give them something to do. And you just have to clothe and feed them then.
Thank you. We'll go to the second of the three. Final.
Good evening all. My name is Hesketh Bloodman. I'm from Antigua. Gentlemen and lady, we're still not speaking with one voice. Every member that speak up there this evening almost everyone, speak of his country. We are not talking as a Caricom people as yet. However, the question I really wanted to ask is about crime, because crime is preventing most of the development in the Caribbean to come to a standstill. You need to find a criminal, you can go to Interpol. What are the Caribbean doing about pooling their resources to try and stop the criminals? In this age of technological development, you can easily pass along the information technology. You can always pass along the information to the next country rather than pass along the criminal. And I haven't heard anybody address that for the evening.
Thank you.
Somebody tell me what you're doing?
Thank you. We'll go to the panel for the evening from the audience.
Hi, I'm Dr. Gloria Gordon. Welcome. I want to make two short comments. One, it is very gratifying to hear the leaders talk about people coming home. But the coming home is a double-edged sword. Many of us have spent the best years of our lives in this country, the most productive years of our lives in this country, and yet we stand here and talk about all the ills at home. Ills in education, ills in health. Why don't we go back home and do some work? The other side is, of course, that with the exception of Barbados, home, the environments are not very welcoming to returning residents, for the most part. It's not that people are bad or wicked, but they see you as coming from foreign, especially the civil servants, and they resent that you come back after X number of years and you're getting this, that, and the other. Yet, in a country like mine, Trinidad and Tobago, when you walk down the streets and you see who the consultants are, you ask yourselves, what is wrong with me? So it's quite complex. It's not as simple and straightforward as we tend to think it is. I think that, I hear Trinidadians in New York say, I can't live in Trinidad again. But I don't think they would be averse to going for 6 months or a year. I think probably what we have to do is set up some kind of Caribbean Peace Corps where people can go for selected periods of time, because there are a number of people who do go and share their skills, but once people know that they were there for good, hell breaks loose. I know, I've been there. I've done it twice, and I'm getting ready to do it again, because that is where home is. And I don't care what anybody says, America will never be home. So if we are serious about contributing, I think that mechanisms have to be put in place to use us maybe on a short-term basis or a long-term basis. And I also want to say, Lloyd used to say that we become Caribbean when we come to New York and London and Paris. We don't know each other. When you look around the New York area, there must be 600 organizations. St. Lucia this, Trinidad and Tobago this, and we stay in our little cliques. We get together on Eastern Parkway for Labor Day, but we still stay with our own. There's the Jamaica posse here, there's St. Lucia posse there. We have not yet found a mechanism. Our education system does not teach our children about each other. We rarely go to each other's islands. Now they're talking about the diaspora tourism. But we still, when we leave Trinidad or leave Barbados, we come to New York, we go to London. So that there are a number of things that have to be put in place. Maybe we have to look at some of the models of our tourism. The tourism that exists in the Caribbean was not developed for the diaspora. We have to look at what the goals are, and if leaders are serious about wanting diaspora people home, they have to do what has to be done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let me invite members of the platform, including anyone who may not have spoken as yet, to make any final responses, observations. Somebody's asking for ladies first.
I wanted to respond to the question on intelligence, what is being done at the regional level in the Caribbean community. A security apparatus was set up for the Cricket World Cup, and it was very successful. And measures are underway to maintain and sustain this apparatus as part of the legacy of Cricket World Cup. So that's in response to the question about what we're doing with the intelligence and using the technology to help with crime. Thank you. Beg your pardon? My name is Lolita Applewick. I'm from the Caricom Secretariat.
Any other comments?
Not a politician.
Please proceed. Have you turned it on?
Right. Okay, thank you. Let me, first of all, my name is Charles Savren. I'm from the Commonwealth of Dominica. Prime Minister Carrick is unable to be here with us tonight, so I am standing in for him. I want to make two observations. First of all, on the question of regional security, the observations concerning the Cricket World Cup is absolutely correct, but as the question of regional currency, where the Prime Minister of Antigua pointed out that we have the East Caribbean dollar, we also have the regional security system, which includes the Eastern Caribbean, that is the OECS and Barbados. So that is a beginning of putting in place a system to deal with regional crime and regional security. We cooperate with Trinidad and Tobago in that regard, and possibly we can extend this level of cooperation to the entire region to recapture the security system that was put in place for Cricket World Cup. On the question of Hurricane Arthur, last year Dominica was struck by Hurricane Dean. And as we know, in the region, we are all prone to natural disasters, hurricanes, earthquakes, floods, volcanoes, monstrat, and so on. And the Caribbean has a regional disaster preparedness organization called SIDERA, and we seek to communicate with SIDERA and have SIDERA to organize reaching out to the international community in the event of natural disasters. But I know from experience that events which occur elsewhere in the world quickly removes international attention from the Caribbean. And therefore, very rapid communication is essential if we are to get international response when a natural disaster strikes. But you also are a tremendous resource in spreading information. You get news at home. Sometimes I am informed from overseas of something that has happened at home. So there is instant communication today, and we must play our part at home, and you, we pray, will play your part here in the diaspora.
Thank you.
I speak in reference to the brother who spoke here about the question of taxing the sex industry. As stimulating as that prospect may be.
Some might ask the tax part or the other part.
We have enough trouble getting taxes from legitimate business. And it is not one of the strategies that we have put on our menu of strategies. So you can rest assured. And I share your outrage at the suggestion. It didn't come from a member of the administration. You can be sure of that. On the question that you raised, that was, I think, in a speculative way, the question of homosexual tourism. Tourism in the Caribbean has its own set of challenges without the introduction of that classification, homosexual tourism. So we, at the moment, are not considering that. And I would dare say, it is highly unlikely that we will be going in that direction. I just wanted also to make reference to a very significant contribution made, or an observation made by a gentleman here, and he said that we don't speak with one voice. That's not entirely fair, but you may get that impression. What is critical? What is critical is that we come to one resolve, and that on the issues affecting Caricom and the development of our people, we must speak as one. We must have common strategies and common approaches to solving the problems. We have 5 million people in the community that live here, but there are another 5 million outside. So we have a community of Caribbean people of at least 10 million people. That's a significant number of people who share common culture and in great part common language. And therefore, all the strategies that you hear being articulated are strategies that seek to find common solutions. And that is the objective and one that we must pursue. But I end as I began. Whilst we talk about this question of unity and getting to find out what we can do for the diaspora, I implore you to seek to try to help us to help you. And I have not heard anyone make reference to the tremendous contribution made by Congresswoman Clarke when she said that the way in which issues are addressed and the power of the forces that operate within the United States are not being properly utilized. Because if you work through your representative here, and if you empower our own to enter politics so that they can wield greater authority in the arena of political decision-making, then we'll be in a much better position to work together on common problems where pressure can be brought through effective lobbying of the community in the United States.
The person who asked the question about Guyana, who spoke about Guyana, said she's an educator. And educators have an obligation to look or to examine the reality in context. When the Caribbean Council of Churches came to Guyana in 1990, they did a study of our society, and they found that our per capita GDP was $260. We had fallen in the 1960s from the Singapore of the Caribbean, when people used to migrate to Guyana. In 30 years, we had fallen below Haiti. That was the Caribbean Council of Churches report. They found that there was a pervasive air of hopelessness in our society, because for 3 decades, we did not have accountable government. And you read the Commonwealth group that came, the Commonwealth Secretariat, the OAS, the Carter Center, IFES, Caricom have all observed the elections since and certified those elections as free and fair. So it wasn't just the task, unlike most Caricom countries, of returning Guyana to democracy. It was not that alone that we had to deal with, but we had to deal with a random economy. I didn't want to go partisan, but since the question was raised, let me deal with it. First of all, when we assumed office, 94% of our revenues went to service debt. We had run up a $2.1 billion US debt, one of the highest per capita debt in the world. Do you know what it is today? Do you know it has become we use 4% of revenue to service debt, down from 94%. Our education system had totally deteriorated. It is from that low. I know you would heckle because you just came from the picket line. I know you would, but give me a chance now. You had a chance to speak, and let me speak about the context. Because this is what passes off for examination of policy. Many of you are may not be familiar with the reality of Guyana. We today, in spite of all they say about our education system, we still supply most of the Caribbean with teachers, nurses, doctors that are trained by the government of Guyana, that are trained. Let me tell you, we cannot generate enough high-paying jobs for them. We still are changing the economy. It started from a very low level. But right now, we have 700 young students in training for medicine. They've come back as young medical doctors on government scholarship. We're training 2,000 nurses. We'd lose half of those, but at least they would staff 8 new hospitals that are being built in Guyana today. And it's not just Trinidad and Tobago that the medicine is free. It's in Guyana, including the first-line antiretroviral drugs is free in Guyana. If you look at our school system, 20% of our limited budget, yes, it's limited, is spent on education. Now, you mentioned about the drug reports, etc. Let me tell you, the same Roger Khan said that the opposition was involved in killings in Buxton, etc. But the United States of America should be the last country in lecturing me or any other country in the world about drugs. The drugs that, let me tell you, Guyana is 83,000 square miles. We have a porous border, huge border with Venezuela, huge border with Brazil. Drugs could easily flow through our borders. But in the United States of America, the country with the best military, the best law enforcement agency, the most money in the world, all of these drugs flowing from Jamaica, Guyana, Peru, Colombia, come into the U.S. This is the biggest failure of law enforcement in any part of the world because all of the drugs come here. They want me to block a small quantity coming through my border, and I don't have much money to spend on that, but they can't block the tons and tons that come here in the streets of New York and other parts of the world. And secondly, they criticize us. They pass legislation to harm on money laundering for Caribbean. Most of the Caribbean countries are affected by this. But where is the biggest money laundering? When you sell the drugs here, you have to collect the money here. This is where the financial transaction takes place. So when they lecture us in the region, every year they put out a report criticizing the Caribbean. And they give us very little money to assist us in the fight against drugs. They need to be, first of all, to address the problem here. If they address the demand, the drug will not come through our territories. So I don't want to waste too much of my time on all of these things. The torture report, you mentioned the torture report. What has happened is that, yeah, we had a case. 2 persons claim that when their army and police raided one of the areas where notorious criminals were, the same criminals who killed 23 persons, and actually 4 are in prison, and 5 have been killed of those prisoners, of those criminals, and they were caught by the police, and they said that they were beaten on their backs by the security forces. That's the torture in Guyana. You have Guantanamo Bay now. You have Guantanamo Bay in this country. 600 people, 600 persons were there without any access. At least, I know you would get worked up. But please listen to me too. Listen to me. Listen to me. You want to listen to me?
President Jagdeo,
You will.
Can I have your indulgence for 1 second?
Yeah, sure.
Can I crave your indulgence in the audience? Members of the audience, civility is just as important in any conversation, and it is important. Let us give the final complete hearing
to what the President has to say, and we will move on. Thank you.
So, my point is that the double standard does exist. At least we had the decency to initiate an investigation, and the report is now before the Defense Board and will be made public once the How long? Yeah. Well, I can't. That's exactly the treatment. That's why
Thank you, President.
You're getting a little taste of what we experience all the time.
Thank you.
So I'm just saying that at least 2 persons were beaten on their backs. And we had the decency to initiate an investigation, and it's before the Defense Board. Contrast that with the behavior of this country, where you have 600 people not getting any access, not even getting a lawyer. So these are just some of the things we're saying. The other gentleman from the other side made a valid point that we have to get, just came off from the protest line, so I know her. I said hello to them outside. Yeah. So, and I didn't walk. Yeah. And the gentleman who spoke on this end made a very valid point about getting the youngsters off the street. So we have to get them more trained, some in the military, some in apprenticeship programs. We're recruiting 2,000 of them to put in an apprenticeship program. They would have you believe that the crime rate in Guyana is, first of all, the highest in the Caribbean, and only Guyana has crime. That's not true, as you all know. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Let's have one final comment from the platform.
I must confess, it's a rather hard act to follow, but I'm going to try and do my little bit. I'm actually sitting in place for the Honourable Dr. Denzel Douglas, who is the Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis. And he has certain responsibilities in relation to Caricom, and in particular the health issue. I don't want anything that I say to be seen as a contradiction to what the Honourable Minister from Jamaica said, because it's right that the question of taxing the issue of sex workers is not on the agenda, and also the issue of sex tourism, homosexual tourism is not on the agenda. But what is on the agenda is the very serious issue as to how you deal with the question of the spread of HIV and AIDS. And what also is a matter of concern is the conflict between the moral issues and the steps that are necessary to deal with the question of spreading that disease. And there's no doubt that there's some evidence that because of the activities of those who are involved in cross-sexual activities, that there is a need to look at that area with some degree of concern. And there is a suggestion that I want to make the point that no decision has been made, but it's right that it is a live issue as to how you deal with that question of homosexuality and the sort of what you call the men, SMNs, men who sleep with men. And that, therefore, in terms of the medical issues, it's become a serious issue and a consideration whether there shouldn't be some legislation to affect the legitimization of that activity so that the criminalization of it, continued criminalization of it, does not continue to affect the question of the spread. So that's a live issue. I think it's right that it should be out there for discussion, and I don't think that it's CARICOM's desire to shy away from having an open discussion on it. But as my Prime Minister is responsible for that, I thought I should at least indicate, sorry, not for that, but for the medical issues, I thought I should indicate that. Just 2 final comments. The exercise today, in respect of the exchange at, with the financial institutions, really was of tremendous value to us, because it was very important to open up the dialogue, to find out exactly what's wrong. And a very significant point came out today, that whilst it's very difficult to understand why there isn't much more direct foreign investment, a very significant point that came through was that Caribbean governments and peoples do not default on their debts. In other words, they meet their commitments financially. And if for no other purpose, the meeting in relation to those, and that wasn't something we said, it was something that was said by the institutions themselves. And an important fact about that in the context of them being forced to recognize that, I think it could give a new thrust in respect of the way that they look at the Caribbean again in relation to that. Of course, there's a lot of work to be done, and I don't believe that you solve the problem just by one conversation. In fact, I believe although we probably will go away not entirely satisfied in terms of tonight's activity, I believe that it's a success. Because what is important here is that we have come to you and we recognize that there are areas of connection. But equally, in this conversation, we have discovered areas of a disconnect. And once you identify the disconnects, it is conceivable that you can work forward towards at least addressing them. And so for us, at least certainly for me, I think I can report back to the Prime Minister that this has been a success, because we know that the diaspora is upset about certain things, and they too are aware that we are not entirely happy about the support that we receive from them. We recognize the vast contributions you've made, and many of the governments have actually instituted provisions and concessions for returning nationals, which may not be as well publicized as they should be. And so we are mindful of that. But we are equally mindful that in order for you to make a serious contribution, your vote is as important as any other vote in relation to the districts in which you vote. And every Congress individual wants to win. And if you're a significant part of his portfolio in terms of a constituency, it seems to me that you have a vote that you can organize and make demands, just as the dear lady, Congress lady indicated. And so to that extent, I believe that what comes out of tonight is realistically a thrust on us, from us, for you, as it were, to combine and use that elective power that you have to assist us, so we in turn can assist you. And thank you very much.
Thank you. It remains only for me to do the following. To thank you for your contributions to the conversation, to thank you for your forbearance and patience, to thank the heads of government and state and delegations, and finally to thank the people who work behind the scenes, whether at the consulate or at your college, to help make this conversation involving people who can be counted and people whose voices count be successful. I bid you good night.